Hi,
Hey,
how's it going?
good to see you.
Sorry, we don't know how to start these
Yeah,
videos.
it's a bit weird thinking about how to start videos when we're doing so many and we've never done it before. Anyway, this video is about stewardship. You'll see from the RD1 learning guide and the unit description that one of the things that we're really interested in this unit is getting you to think about the bigger picture, getting you to think about why are we doing research and why are you doing research in particular. And one of the ways that we have to think about that problem or that topic is this concept of stewardship.
Yeah, and it really goes to this point in the subtitle about moral responsibilities. What that means is not legal responsibilities, but the kind of responsibilities you impose on yourself out of a sense of values. But we're going to have a short discussion today about what those values look like in the space of research. And that's the screen clicker not working. So
This is live TV.
marvels of modern technology. So what is a steward? Probably most of you will have heard this word before, but it's not that commonly used. Generally, it refers to somebody who takes care of something. That's how we would summarize this. We've got a couple of other notes up here as well. You can see it's the idea of responsibility for something, for a certain set of duties, perhaps. And most fundamentally, it's about the integrity of that thing for which you're responsible. And integrity is a tough word to define, especially when we're talking about different contexts. But it means that there's no cheating or nothing's wrong. There's no values being subverted, those kinds of things. And there are different examples of stewardship around that you might have heard of. And one of the most common ones is actually in the horse racing industry. If you listen to the news, then it's a good chance that once, twice, three times a year, you'll hear about some kind of scandal in the horse racing industry, and they'll talk about how the stewards have launched an investigation. And if you know anything about the horse racing industry, I know very little about it, but I know that the stewards have a formal role, formally defined role in all of the state legislation, all of the state bodies that license and sanction horse racing. Stewards play an essential role in preserving the integrity of that industry. And the same is true for things like environmental stewardship, although that's less formally defined. People can take on that role of being a custodian, looking after the land, looking after environmental initiatives. But it's also something that you can see in the space of education. And Alex, do you maybe want to talk about that a little?
Yeah, so essentially, when we're thinking about stewardship, with those words that we've bolded on the screen, they're really important. You think about it as somebody who wants to make sure that things go as they ought to go in whatever the domain they're looking after things for. So in the context of research, we even have an example within the MRes itself, within the Master of Research. Recently, we had a large collaborative discussion and meeting with a bunch of colleagues from around the university, including the discipline leads that we have at the university, the people who are responsible for each research discipline that we have. We have 41 within the university, 41 declared research disciplines. And in an email communication, one of our colleagues said to us when speaking about this, as I've argued before, these discussions, that is discussions that we're having about the Master of Research, how it should go, how it should take shape, how we ought to run it, these discussions must include experienced academics who want to contribute to the improvement and stewardship of the MRes. So that's a really interesting thing for us to think about, that stewardship isn't just about making things better. In fact, it can be separate to that. Stewardship is about looking after things, making things go as we think they ought to go. So to help us think about stewardship in the context of research, we use this text written by Chris Goldie.
Short text.
It's pretty short, 2 pages, I think, only. And I'm going to read through that with you in entirety in another video. And Goldie's work for the Carnegie Institute is used at Western Sydney University by a bunch of colleagues to think about and articulate why we're doing this work. Why are we putting people through programs of high degree research learning? And what do we intend for them at the end? And stewardship, as Goldie articulates it, has these 3, I guess you might call them facets, 3 aspects. And they are that if you're a researcher, if you're somebody coming through a doctoral or a master's program, you are a person who ought to take on the role of steward, and that role includes the preservation of knowledge, that is understanding what has come before in your research discipline and choosing to curate certain elements of it that are useful going forward, and kind of put into storage or put aside elements of that research that have gone before that are less useful now for all sorts of reasons. It also means being responsible for generating knowledge. We often hear people talk about generating new knowledge. That's a bit of a problematic concept that we'll go into in another video, but generating knowledge means kind of pushing the boundaries out further and further in terms of what we know about the world, the universe. But also, really interestingly, Goldie talks about transforming knowledge. In the MRes, we call that, we've translated her term to be translation. That you're somebody who takes complex knowledge about a thing in the world and translates that kind of complex thinking and language that's used to describe that thing into simpler, more easily able to be understood language, either for use by people in other research disciplines, other stewards, for example, or for people outside of the realm of research who might benefit from that knowledge or who might want to know about that area that you're looking into.
And that's, as a quick note, why we have the unit Writing Beyond the Academy, to train you in that skill, particularly the format of the conversation, that online news and sort of research website. But we'll come to that in another unit. We just wanted to flag it for you. That was part of this sort of general network of values.
And one of the important things here that we really want to start underscoring from this video, we'll go into quite a few times over the course of the unit, is that by starting an MRes or a cognate degree, where if you're coming in from another degree, you're choosing to become a steward of your field of research, of your discipline. That is that if you're choosing to do research, you're choosing to contribute to the benefit of the species. You're choosing to contribute to the preservation, generation, and translation of knowledge in your field of research. And we think that's a really important concept, a really important idea for you to think about and to process and to take hold of. Because what it means is that when things get tough, you have something higher to kind of hold on to and look towards and to help guide you. It gives you a good sense of how to operate with integrity when you're going through the process of doing your research.
It's sometimes what gets called a moral compass. You know, you have these ideas, this idea about a set of values that you have, and when you're lost, when you've got difficult decisions, when there's challenging decisions ahead of you, you use those values as a compass to steer you in certain directions. And we're actually going to talk about that a lot in RD2, Research and Development 2. So we won't go too far ahead of ourselves, but it's important to say that because this is a theme that we continue sort of over the course of the MRes, over all of the core units at least. And we want to finish with this quotation from Goldie. This is what we think is the most important line in that piece. It captures everything ultimately about the piece. And she says, one, and that means you. That means us. It means all of us. But in this case, it means you. You are a steward of the discipline, not simply the manager of your own career. And what that means is your responsibility is not just towards yourself and your own career advancement, but it's towards preserving the discipline that you're a part of, and the role that discipline, understanding the role that discipline plays in the broader kind of enterprise of human existence. Why do we have these different disciplines? What do they contribute? They all contribute something, and everyone in them can contribute really valuably. But we all have the responsibility to uphold the integrity of our disciplines as well. What happens when colleagues create, dodgy research findings that you're the expert who can debunk? These are the kinds of questions we'll get into later. We won't bog you down with them now. We simply want to set up this discussion about the notion of stewardship, because we're going to carry it through with you in week 0 and throughout all of the core units.
So I guess for the messages for the next video is a read along with me video. So I'll see you in the next video, but you should also have a read of this text by yourself. It's a really interesting one to kind of start thinking about, well, why am I here? Why do I want to enter into the world of research?
And with that, guys, we're going to say over and out. Peace, love, and good research. Oh, hang on. I think we're still recording.
Are we?
If we're still recording, then just give us a moment. All right. That was just stopping share. It's lucky we didn't sort of pull out a beer or
Yeah,
we don't have any.
I'm really hungry. Let's have lunch.
We're going to have lunch. See you later.